Melissa, so Joe Hockey's splashed out $8 million. He hasn't even sold his previous $8 million mansion. Obviously, you know, it pays to be a diplomat.
Yeah, that's right. So he's currently got his current home on the market for $8 million, and now he's splashed out another $8 on a home. It's a historic home in Hunters Hill as well, and it's called Wyballina. So this property has come onto the market for the first time in 35 years, and it is it's pretty flashy. It's on more than 2,000 square meters of land, and it is it's just a really well-known property locally.
It's a really historic home too, isn't it?
That's right. So it was originally built for Charles Edward Jenniston, and he was actually a mayor of Hunters Hill. He had the house built for his wife and his 11 children. So it's got 7 bedrooms, which I don't even think that would have fit the 11 children back then. But it was then later bought by 2GB's Fred Sturge Harty, and it stayed in the Harty family until most recently when Joe Hockey purchased it.
And will it need much done to it?
It will need a fair bit done to it. It isn't in the most prestige condition, but it is, like we said, a really historic, well-known home in the area. So the interiors are probably a little dated. It'll need a bit of a fix-up, but I'm sure Joe's got enough money to do that.
Looks like he does when he parts of the other one. And a Malvern mansion has set a new home price record in Melbourne.
That's right, another historic property. So it's actually broken the state's record, selling for $52.5 million.
For one home.
Incredible. And it was, it's now called the Stonington Mansion, but at one stage it was the Australian Government House down there. And it was owned until just now by an art dealer, Rod Menzies. I'm sure some people may have heard of him. And while the agents are really tight-lipped about who bought it and how much exactly it sold for, we've heard that it may have been a Chinese buyer, which is pretty interesting.
Well, that is because when it initially went out of public hands into private hands, that was a controversy in itself, wasn't it? Now if it's owned offshore, that might...
Exactly. So I guess we'll see what the locals are going to have to say about that. But yeah, again, a really historic property. The photos of it are incredible from the outside, and once again, inside it might need a little bit of polishing, but it's got some really amazing period features.
I'm sure anyone who spent $52 million on it probably has some plans for it.
Yeah, probably.
What is the home like? Is it very homey, or is it more like an official building?
I think it's more like an official building, but it does have those touches inside. You know, there's not a lot of information about what the actual property is like, but if you see some of the photos, you know, there's timber floorboards, there's carpeted staircases, there's a bit of LED light windows and all that kind of thing. So it's a pretty incredible property. I'm sure with a bit of love, it'll go far.
And speaking of incredible properties, there's this magnificent estate in Sunshine Beach, which is one of my favourite places in the world that's hit the market. Tell me a bit about it.
Yeah, so it's actually sold, and it went for a whopping price as well, $22 million. So it is Queensland's biggest sale of the year so far, and it was just beat out by a $25 million property that sold last year, which was the state's record. So not quite the state record this time around, but still a really big price. It's a beautiful home right on the waterfront. It has a pool that overlooks the water. It's just, it is really prestige. I suppose it's a real palatial home and just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And Pat Rafter was in the same neighbourhood until recently too.
That's right. And so I think he's sold for about $18 million, if I recall. So he sold last year, I believe. And yeah, obviously it's a place that people want to move in and out of.
Yeah, well, and this one's got a tennis court on the beachfront and a pool. Like, there'd be no reason to leave, would there?
Yeah, exactly. It was actually renovated by designer David Hicks, so it's had not a complete rebuild or anything like that, but a good reno. And if you see the interiors, it's open plan. Everything flows out to the terrace overlooking the water. It's just beautiful.
Do we know anything about the seller or the buyer?
We don't know too much. We know that the seller was IT entrepreneur David Wallace. As for the buyer, there's not too much known about who they were, but obviously they wanted to live in the area. They inspected the property for 2 hours before they absolutely fell in love with it and snapped it up.
Well, I'm not surprised, but obviously you'd need $20 million and the love would come easily. The $20 million, maybe not so much.
Yeah.
And this last one's a bit of a treat for anyone who's got a cupcake addiction.
That's right. So it is the home of my cupcake addictions, Elise Strawn, if I said that correctly. And it is a beautiful house. So she bakes in her kitchen, films it for her 3 million YouTube followers.
Yeah, we can see some of that there, some of her incredible creations.
Yeah.
Well, and they've been whipped up in the kitchen of this home, have they?
Yes, they have. So she actually has 3 kitchens. So she has a kitchen in the butler's pantry, which is a good place for her to hide her mess while she's cooking up a storm. She then has a main kitchen with a teppanyaki grill, and then a 3rd kitchen where she does all of her filming. So definitely the house of a chef, I'd say. But along with that, you know, the home has a swimming pool, a cabana. She lives there with her husband and her 2 sons. So it's a real family-friendly home. And as opposed to the properties we spoke about just then, it's just got a price guide of over 1.95 million. So affordable, but still above the suburbs median price, which comes in at under 900,000. So.
Wow. And do we know why she's moving on or why they're selling?
We don't know too much about why she's moving on. She does love the home, but she spends a lot of her time between the Gold Coast, LA, and other overseas cities. So I can imagine that she might just be looking for a bit of a sea change.
Fantastic. Melissa, thank you so much for those amazing properties. I feel like we've had a little tour of some beautiful places this evening. Thanks for your time.
No worries.